In our weekly Gulf disaster check-in, BP has reached a milestone, a $3 billion milestone. The tab to, quote, make this right, as BP's chief executive once said, is at $3 billion. According to BP, that includes the cost of response, containment, relief well drilling, claims paid out, and federal costs. Now BP has another environmental mess to explain. At its Texas City, Texas refinery, the site of a 2005 explosion that killed 15 workers, there's been an incident that resulted in hundreds of thousands of pounds of chemicals being spewed into the air. The event was reported by our colleagues at Frontline and the investigative nonprofit newsroom ProPublica after initial reporting by the Daily News of Galveston County. The event actually happened 2 weeks before the Gulf disaster. ProPublica's managing editor joins us in studio, Stephen Engelberg. Stephen, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
I want to break this down in three parts because this is kind of a big thing to digest. The event itself, the aftermath, and then BP's role within the oil community and its history. This event took place on April 6th, 2010. Tell me what exactly happened that 17,000 pounds of benzene went into the air, 37,000 pounds of nitrogen oxides, and 186,000 pounds of carbon monoxide ended up in the air.
Well, refining petroleum, or refining oil into petroleum, is a very complex process. And as it happened at this refinery, there was a particular part in something called the ultra cracker, which malfunctioned. And BP at that point faced a choice. What they had was a process that was no longer really adequate, and the chemicals were now going to go somewhere. And what they chose to do is continue running the refinery and send the chemicals to a sort of gigantic incinerator, what's called a flare, which is some 300 feet in the air, and they would incinerate the byproducts of this process, which are very hazardous. Now, industry standards say that roughly 2% of what you incinerate gets into the air. So it would seem that BP had a very good reason to know that some of this was going to escape. But that's not the way they handled it. What they did is rely upon the monitors at the sort of edge of the plant, which were a 6-foot fence. And amazing enough, they didn't show any problems. And it took them 40 days, BP says, to recognize that they had dumped some 500,000 pounds of chemicals, including, as you say, 17,000 pounds of benzene, which is a cancer-causing chemical. And at that point, they discover this and they make a report. Now, the reporting standard in the state of Texas for a release of benzene is 10 pounds. So you can do the math yourself and see that 17,000 is a bit north of what it should have been.
This went on for 40 days before BP realized they had a problem. Does that wash with you?
Well, to be fair to BP, what they told us, which I think only raises more questions, is that they had a second, more sophisticated way of monitoring the emissions, and that they informed the Texas authorities that they would be having this release, and that they would continue to do the monitoring and report if anything happened. Now, what they say is it took 40 days to analyze what they were seeing and get it right. This is an explanation that we are probing into some more. I'm not a chemical engineer. It's hard to know whether that's credible or not. I will tell you that we called some other states, including California, and in California, the regulators there said we would not allow this to go on. If you had a broken part and you had emissions, you could use a flare only in an hour, a few hours of emergency. You certainly couldn't do what these people did, which is for 40 days continue to rely on this as a piece of normal production.
Why not just shut it down? Why not shut it down, take care of the problem, and then go back to regular production?
Well, that question is pretty much the point. I don't know. Obviously, there is a lot of money involved here, but it's worth keeping in mind that yours and my sense of what a lot is not really related to the oil business. I mean, BP, according to some estimates, makes about $45 million a day in profit. That's $45 million every single day. We did some math on this particular facility, again, using industry estimates. We think that it might have cost them $25 million over 40 days to shut this down. That's a very rough guess, but if you see that, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to continue polluting the air over Texas City, given the kind of money you're making.
This brings us to the point of fines. This particular refinery had received an $87 million fine last year from OSHA. You described the kind of profits they make. Why would an oil company who makes that much money consider a fine a deterrent?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, the question you have here, we've talked in the economy about too big to fail. Have we now reached a point where some companies are too big to fine, where you really can't get their attention? Now, we have reported that the federal government is currently considering the question of whether to bar BP from federal contracts, all federal contracts and drilling on federal lands. That would be a very, very big decision for the United States government. If that happens, that will get BP's attention.
I want to go back to the day-to-day operations of this refinery. People are going in and out. People are working in this refinery. Clearly, they know what's going on. Why didn't we necessarily have any whistleblowers? Is it that this is a one-company town?
Well, it certainly is a one-company town. But to look at the history of this plant, I think there have been some whistleblowers. In 2005, there was a very serious explosion, which we looked into, in which 15 people died. And that's what eventually prompted the $87 million fine, because not only did the explosion occur, but OSHA came back and said, you haven't done the things that we told you back in 2005 you needed to do as a result of this terrible accident. Since the accident, there have been workers who have come forward and described the conditions in the plant. And more interestingly, documents have become public through litigation in which BP's own internal investigators made clear this is a dangerous, terrifying place. They had done a survey of workers right before the accident in which workers said they were terrified to go to work every day. This is what they were telling their own investigators. No less an authority than James Baker,